Joseph Stalin. On December 18th of 1879, in the Russian peasant village of Gori, Georgia, Joseph Vissarionovich Saakashvili, later known as Joseph Stalin, was born. He was the son of Vissarion Yugashvili, a cobbler, and Ketevan Geladze, a washerwoman. Joseph was a frail child. At age 7, he contracted smallpox, leaving his face scarred. A few years later, he was injured in a carriage accident which left arms slightly deformed. Some accounts state his arm trouble was a result of blood poisoning from the injury. Joseph's mother, a devout Russian Orthodox Christian, wanted him to become a priest. In 1888, she managed to enroll him in church school in Gori. Joseph did well in school, and his effort gained him a scholarship to Tiflis Theological Seminary in 1894. A year later, Joseph came in contact with Mesamet Dazi, a secret organization that supported Georgian independence from Russia. Some of the members were socialists who introduced him to the writings of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. Joseph joined the group in 1898. Though he excelled in seminary school, Joseph left in 1899. Accounts differ as to the reason, but official school records state that he was unable to pay the tuition and withdrew. It's also speculated he was asked to leave due to his political views challenging the Tsar's regime of Nicholas II. Joseph chose not to return home, but stay in Tiflis, devoting his time to the revolutionary movement. For a time, he found work as a tutor and later as a clerk at the Tiflis Observatory. In 1909, he joined the Social Democratic Labour Party and worked full-time for the revolutionary movement. In 1902, he was arrested for coordinating a labor strike and exiled to Siberia, the first of his many arrests and exiles in the fledgling years of the Russian Revolution. It was during this time that Joseph adopted the name Stalin, meaning still in Russian. Though never a strong orator like Vladimir Lenin or an intellectual one like Leon Trotsky, Joseph Stalin excelled in the mundane operations of the revolution, calling meetings, publishing leaflets, and organizing strikes and demonstrations. After escaping from exile, he was marked by the Okranka, the Tsar's secret police, as an outlaw and continued his work in hiding, raising money through robberies, kidnappings, and extortion. Stalin gained infamy being associated with the 1907 Tiflis bank robbery, which resulted in several deaths and 250,000 rubles stolen. In February 1917, the Russian Revolution began. By March, the Tsar had abdicated the throne and was placed under house arrest. For a time, the revolutionaries supported a provisional government, believing a smooth transition of power was possible. In April 1917, Bolshevik leader Vladimir Lenin denounced the provisional government, arguing that the people should rise up and take control by seizing land from the rich and factories from the industrialists. By October, the revolution was complete and the Bolsheviks were in control. Stalinism, the method of rule or policies of Joseph Stalin, Soviet Communist Party, as state leader from 1929 until his death in 1953. Stalinism is associated with a regime of terror and totalitarian rule. Basic to Stalinism was the doctrine of socialism in one country, which held that, though the socialist goal of world proletarian revolution was not to be abandoned, a viable classless society could be built within Soviet boundaries and despite encirclement by a largely capitalist world. Stalin, appealing both to socialist revolutionary fervor and to Russian nationalism, launched in the late 1920s a program of rapid industrial development of unprecedented magnitude. While socialist ideology foresaw a withering away of the state as the classless society became a reality, Stalin asserted that the state must instead become stronger before it could be eliminated. Stalinism held that the enemies of socialism within and without Russia would try to avert the final victory of the revolution. To face these efforts and protect the cause, it was argued the state must be strong. As part of the struggle against those who he considered political rivals, Stalin identified political opposition with treason and used this as a weapon in his struggle against Leon Trotsky and Nikolai I. Bukharin and their supporters, by February 1939, most of the old Bolsheviks, those revolutionaries who in 1917 had begun the revolution, had been exterminated. Millions more, estimated at from 7 million to 15 million, were sent to the forced labor camps that Stalin made an integral part of the Soviet economy. About 20 million died as a result of the labor camps, forced collectivization, famine, and executions. Another 20 million were victims of imprisonment, exile, and forced relocation.
In the beginning, Stalin and Hitler became allies, which led to World War II. Although their alliance was short-lived, since shortly after, in June of 1941, Germany invaded the USSR. Under the leadership of Stalin, the Soviet Union became a major role in the defeat of Hitler during World War II, since he demanded the death of allied nations so that Germany would lose some of its power. Since he knew that without help, Hitler would win, he became a temporal ally with Britain and the USA to beat Germany. Stalin's regime was a very cruel one, since he violated many human rights, such as sending people to labor camps, or gulags as they were called, that had lots of violence, extreme climate, hard labor, small food rations, and unsanitary conditions, which led to a high number of deaths. Stalin also was responsible for the deportation of 3.3 million people. He sent these people to underdeveloped republics in Central Africa with harsh living conditions, and in 1940 he sent to execute about 25,700 Polish prisoners, which became known as the Katyn Massacre.
Stalin's death toll was not calculated until February 1989, 2 years before the fall of the Soviet Union, published in the weekly tabloid Argumenti I Fatti. This tabloid established that the death toll directly attributable to Stalin's rule amounted to a total of 40 million lives, including the 20 million lives lost during World War II. Consequences of Stalin's dictatorship. Clearly, the list of negatives will take quite a bit longer and cannot be emphasized enough that no equivalence or balance is implied by stating the positives, but Stalin's rule did witness the following positives: the rapid industrialization and modernization of the Soviet economy, education for many Soviet citizens, especially those in the cities, and growth of the Soviet Union into a global power, dwarfing the European powers and rivaling the United States. On the other hand, the human cost of these advances was astonishing. The negative consequences of Stalin's rule included millions of small farmers forced onto collective farms and starved due to Stalin's policies. This was particularly horrible in the Ukraine. Another thing was the devotion of resources for industrialization at the expense of standard of living. The harsh limitations on speech and expression reached totalitarian levels. Stalin developed a police state that exceeded even the considerable brutality of the Tsarist regime, and expansion in Eastern Europe, establishing client states.
3 years after Stalin's death in 1953, Soviet leaders led by Nikita Khrushchev denounced the cult of Stalin and the terrorism perpetrated by his regime. They saw Stalinism as a temporary aberration in the Soviet socialist development. Others saw it as a brutal but necessary and inevitable phase of that development. Still others saw in Stalinism an irrevocable Soviet break.
In conclusion, we believe that Stalin's government had more negatives than positives, which imbalance all his good deeds. An example of this is the millions of people that died in order to develop the country into one which is more industrialized. This ideology caused more problems such as other dictatorships for the people in the Soviet Union in the long run, which caused censorship and violation of human rights. And this was made only by his ideologies, which created a more totalitarian regime in which the government held all power.